So I'm here with my cousin, Allena. We are first cousins. I have known her my entire life. She's a couple of years older than me, so she can't say the same. But
I was at your mom and dad's wedding.
Yes, she was.
I was in it.
Allena Gabosch, folks. She was the flower child or flower girl, I guess.
Well, I was a flower child later, but I was a flower girl at the wedding.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, and we have an interesting family because my experience of our family was that they were rather racist, and yet we have some different racial influences in our family. So it almost seemed like we were reacting against our own DNA sometimes. But I know that was particularly poignant for you, and I'm just really, first of all, just wanting to thank you for sharing this, and I'd love to hear what your personal experience with racism has been. First of all, as I understand it, you identify as biracial. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what everything constitutes, but a little bit of background is I was raised by my father and my stepmother, and I didn't know my mother until I was 19. My mother is half Cherokee, and yet her father, who was full Cherokee, had really curly hair and really dark skin. So our guesstimate is that there was also some African American in, because it was real common for the slaves to go into the Cherokee nations and stuff. But my mom was she had really curly hair, and I ended up with really curly hair, even though it's not curly anymore. And so I know that I'm part Native American. And there's supposedly also Native American on Dad's side, and there's a good chance I'm part Black, and of course I'm white, and I was raised white. So I identify as mixed race, and because I don't know really what it is, but I know I'm not just white. That said, I was raised white, and I was raised with white privilege, and I have all of the white privilege stuff that goes along with that. I really had that, with some exceptions.
And what does that mean to you when you say that you were raised white?
Well, my dad was an extremely racist person, first of all. My hometown that I grew up in, Idaho, had 2 Black families in the whole town. And so, in fact, our minority was not Black because there were only 2 Black families. There was too small of a number for it to be considered a minority. Our minority was Hispanic and some Japanese, because where I grew up in Idaho was close to where the concentration camps were. So we had Japanese, but we had a lot of Hispanic people. But my father was extremely racist, and I lived in a very, very, very white world. And so I never really experienced anything but living as a white person, with some exceptions of some of the things that happened to me when I was at school and stuff, because I have really large lips, a really big ass, and dark skin. I was one of these people that my stepmother used to call me as brown as a berry, whatever that means. And I would get really, really tan and stuff. So I didn't know about racism as far as it being racist, because I grew up, I immediately knew my dad was racist, but I didn't experience, what I experienced was something that was really different for somebody raised in a white world. And that was, and I'm going to use the word because I want to be very blunt about this, is that there were some boys in my high school that called me nigger lips.
Yeah.
Or pusshead. Those were the 2 nicknames I got. And, but nigger lips was the name that I was called a lot. And I never really, I would just be like, it was devastating to be teased about my looks. And I wasn't super popular because I was a big girl and I was a tomboy, and I was really smart, and boys didn't like smart girls back then at all. Yeah. And unless they wanted to like cheat on their paper or something. And, but being called that name was really devastating for me. And I came home one day in tears, and my father, to his credit, trying to soften it. I mean, I had my issues with my dad over the years, and I had my issues with my dad's racism over the years, like extremely. But he looked at me and he says, well, someday when those boys kiss those lips, they'll know that they're wonderful lips. And guess what? He was right, because I am known to be a really good kisser. But but that was something that kind of stuck with me, and it actually made me more aware of racial disparity when I was teased about just my lips, right?
Yeah.
And so I became very more cognizant, I think, than the rest of my family at that time because of that experience, and
Right.
and the fact that it's weird now. Again, the two black families in our town, I didn't see a lot of racism directed at them, and I think it was partly because, I mean, right, we had 3 kids in my school that were there was this James and Betty, who were twins, and their brother Charlie, and the Spencer kids were my friends, and they, nobody even thought about that, but I did see racist attitudes towards our Hispanic kids, the Hispanic
Yeah.
kids, and so yeah, I used to have big arguments with my dad. I mean, like huge arguments with my dad, and that sometimes ended in me getting beat for calling him out on his racism, and that was a really tough thing for me. But I couldn't let it not. I couldn't not say anything,
Yeah.
And
Wasn't he wanting to, sometimes when he would beat you, he actually wanted to beat the Indian out of you? Was that some of his?
yeah, I'd beat your mother out of you, is what it was.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I'll beat your mom out of you if it's the last thing I ever do, was a quote one time, and that's because my mom left him, and he never really forgave her for that.
Yeah.
And the best thing I ever did was go find my mom, by the way. That's a little side story, but yeah, it was. And I mean, my dad, we used to watch Tarzan. You remember Tarzan?
Oh, hell yes.
And my dad would call the natives in Tarzan jungle bunnies. And my little brother Chris, who was 6, 7 years old, so he's little, young, because he was 8 years younger than me. So yeah, he was maybe 7 at the time. Would go, look at the jungle bunnies, Daddy, and he would get, but he didn't know what he was saying was wrong. And I remember I looked at my dad one day and I said, "Are you proud of what you're doing?" He goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You're teaching my little brother that that's a proper term to call black people. And the thing is someday he's going to say that to somebody and they're going to beat him up for it."
Yeah.
And then my dad smacked me, but whatever,
Oh, honey.
It was weird. It was very strange,
That's
and
it.
and I ended up living with this, until I left home and found out, and then I ended up in California, where a part of California where the majority of in Oakland, which at that time was very, very African American, and had a completely different experience about race then, and it kind of changed my life, actually.
Did you, because you are biracial, I'm just wondering, did you find that there were certain races that were more accepting of you, or no?
Well, I was very attractive to some of the black guys in my in my world, and I remember when I still wasn't sure about my race. I remember this guy, this cute young black guy. He was a lot younger than me. He goes, "You got to have some sister in you, honey, because those lips and that ass are definitely sister." And I actually thought, like, that was cool. And so yeah, I mean, over the years, even I had people that would question my racial status and stuff, and I'm like, I really don't know. I don't know what it is. I will find out soon. I'm doing some ancestry stuff, and I will find out. But even then, it doesn't give you completely 100% information.
No,
but,
it doesn't. But so you're saying some people question your race.
Yeah.
How is that for you? I mean, that doesn't, for me. So I've never had anybody question my race. I present very white, and I'm hearing that some people have questioned your race, and I'm wondering, has that felt like harassment in any way? Did you resent that they were asking those questions? How did that land?
No, I actually thought it was kind of funny that people would bring it up. I have a pretty weird sense of humor. I'd be like, seriously? What difference does it make? And that was always kind of my response, is what difference does it make? Yeah. But I remember, because I do present white overall, and stuff, I remember having conversations with people that their conversations turned racist, and it would change my whole feeling for them. I remember years ago, I was with a girlfriend of mine, and just a friend, and we were playing cards with some other friends of hers, and this one guy started to give me detail by detail about how African Americans are related to apes and we're not. And he was talking about the shape of feet, and he was just going on. And I just stood up and turned to my friend and I said, as long as he's here, I'm gone. And I left. I just walked out. Yeah. And so, and I found that just so just totally obscene and bizarre that somebody would even have that. And I was one of the ones that would call people out on the racism, and I always have. And like did it where I worked, and I wouldn't allow it. And I bartended a lot over the years, and you would get these old guys and stuff, and I'd be like, nope, can't do that. Can't say those words here. And but people wondered, but they weren't sure. So I never really got too much other than in high school. High school was the worst of it.
Yeah. Here I am. I'm your cousin. I've known you my entire life, which is a lot of years.
Just a couple.
And I didn't know that you were bullied racially in school. That actually when I just learned that this year, and I because of the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, we started talking about this, and there was a way in which I felt like I had not shown up in a way that maybe I should have as your cousin, that I should have been a little more curious or sensitive to how things might have been for you. And I'm just wanting to check that out with you now and see how you feel about that.
Oh, I feel fine. I'm fine. I mean, I had a crazy childhood, my father, bless his heart, he was not a very nice man half the time. And then the other half the time he was wonderful. So, it's kind of like your dad. I mean, we had our issues with our parents, right? And my father he had his stuff. And I mean, the last time he hit me is because he found out that I had a black boyfriend. Oh, and I was an adult. I mean, I was 18, but I was an adult. Yeah. And that was the very last time he ever struck me. It was over race, you know? And I told him, I said, who I sleep with is none of your business, and neither is who I date. It's none of your business. Yeah. And I said I dated a black man. Yeah. So what? But yeah, he was not happy about things like that. And like I said, and the irony is that my guess is that our family has a mixture of all kinds of things in them. Anyhow, I mean, we're obviously very, very European, but we've also got other stuff. But that's something that my father would never. In fact, I remember him having an argument with Uncle Dick many years ago, and he's like, I like the Spencers. Those were one of the black families and stuff, but they need to go back where they come from. And Uncle Dick looks at him and goes, well, Ralph, does that mean we're going to cut you in pieces and send you all over Europe? That was my Uncle Dick. And I was like, I thought that was funny. So.
Well, you have to hand it to Uncle Dick. He is pretty racially open.
He is definitely.
But your Uncle Jim, my dad, was definitely a racist too. And I can remember probably around the time I was 15 getting in his face and having some pretty heated arguments. I remember he was saying some really racist things about Native Americans one day. And I called him out on it, and I said, well, you have some Native American blood. Why were you doing that? And he said, and this was after Grandma had actually researched the family tree and found that out, right? And he got really, really angry, and he says, I do not, don't you ever say that again.
Oh my God. And here we have now, we have cousins who are mixed race, and one cousin who obviously presents as black, and our dads are probably rolling in the grave. Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. I remember my mother, who also is racist. Oh my God, Allena, it wasn't that long ago, probably about 5 years ago. And I'm not real proud of the way I handled this, but I was so livid because she started off by telling me there's two types of Black people. And as soon as she said that, I told her, get out of my car.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Nope.
Get out of my car.
Agree.
I can't look at you. I can't hear another word out of your mouth. Just get out of my car.
I agree. Yeah. And when Dad and I had the conversation about the last time he hit me, it was Christmas Day of all things. He had come to my apartment to pick me up because I wasn't living at home. I was living on my own. Yeah. And I had made the mistake of telling my little sister, who is at that time, she was still quite daddy's girl, and she was still at home. She was in her mid-teens, that I'd had a Black boyfriend that summer after I left home, when I was down in Portland. And my dad pulled the car over before we got to the house and said, I heard you slept with an N-word, and they used the N-word. And I looked at him, and that's when I said, who I sleep with is none of your business, and I dated a Black man. And then he hit me. And then he wouldn't let me out of the car, and I still went and had Christmas with the family, which was really awkward. You know?
Oh, Allena, I'm so sorry.
Now, that said, I think that if he wouldn't have died as early as he did, things would have changed, because my little brother Chris was one of the coolest kids on the planet, and he was a little hippie kid, in fact, and he and my dad died together, but I swear he was mellowing my dad out, because I saw my dad not long before he died, and he was way mellower, like just way mellower, and I think that if he would have stayed alive, he might have mellowed out because of Chrissy,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. It's
never know.
One of the things that comes up for me is I think about the fact that you were separated from your mother, who's full-blooded Native American, for so many years. And I'm wondering if once you reunited with her, did that help you get more connected to your Native American roots, or was that even a thing for you?
Well, not so much, but my mom was only half Native, and her dad was full-blooded. And not so much because she didn't have a good connection with her father.
Okay.
And that had ended like when she was really young and stuff. So not that much. But Mom was she was proud of being part Cherokee, and she would talk about it. But her mother had never had it registered. So she never got any of the benefits. And we actually used to talk about it before she died. We used to talk about maybe we should figure out how to register her so she could get some of the Cherokee benefits. And then we just never got around to it. But she was proud of that. She was very proud of her Cherokee background, and that's one of the reasons why I would talk about it with people, about me being part Cherokee, because I'm a quarter. According to my mom.
Well, in some tribes, that's enough to be considered.
Exactly. And then we have whatever grandma was, which is something from Florida, I think, or something.
Iroquois.
Iroquois. That's right.
Iroquois.
So I have some Iroquois in there too.
Yeah.
But
well, you're going to do your 23andMe, and then you'll find out.
Yep, I am.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I did my 23andMe, and I have a small percentage. It's mostly European, but there is a small percentage of blood coming from 14th century Africa. So
yeah.
I don't know what that means, but it kind of sounds like a slave ship to me. But
anyway, here's the reality is that we all are melting pots.
Yeah.
We all have little bits and pieces of this and that and the other. And we all do. And that we need to realize that we can't, this racist crap's got to quit, because we're all connected.
Yeah, we're really are. And I think it's possible that because I grew up with you as my cousin, there were a lot of features that I just never ever saw as being racially linked. It was just family. So and this kind of brings up this thing about being colorblind. I understand why right now the narrative is that we don't want to try to be colorblind, because then we negate the racism, the systemic racism that's afflicting people who look different. but at the same time, I was just thinking there were times when I was in college that I just wasn't tracking people's races, and sometimes I would get admonished for not noticing, and I'm like, but they just look like people to me. And I'm wondering if that ever happened to you, or if that was just me.
No, I think that I had those experiences too, where the race became not the issue, and it wasn't apparent. It was just, these are people that were my friends, and they lived here, and the other friends lived here, and I'd hang out with them, and I didn't. I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I had some experiences that were very profound around race too, good and bad. I had a very bad experience with being raped by a black man. And I thought, now here's an interesting thing. I thought that the fact that he was black was irrelevant, completely irrelevant. This man raped me, right? And he just happened to be African American.
Right.
Until a really good friend of mine who happened to be black, who I didn't even think about, right?
Yeah.
Put his arms around me, and I started to cry.
Ah.
And I was so angry at myself over this.
Yeah.
I was furious with myself for having that reaction. Now, to my friend's credit, this is what he did. He says, "What's wrong?" And I told him, and I said, "I'm so embarrassed." And he goes, "No." He says, "Let's work on this." And now, and at that time, we weren't lovers. We were just really good friends. Every week he took me out and did something with me until there was a point where he could put his arms around me and I didn't start to shake or cry. I mean, I'd had a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And this man helped me wipe the racist part of it away.
Oh.
But I had a visceral response that I was pissed off at myself for having that response. And when I think about trauma around things like rape, well, duh, it makes sense. But it was, because I was like, I was kind of that, it wasn't about his color. It was just the fact that he was a man who raped me. But it was in my heart. I mean, or in my trauma, it was. And I was angry at myself for that for a long time.
I think you're bringing up a really, really important point. I really do. And I relate to it actually, because I was also raped by a black man, but long after I had had a succession of black lovers. And I
had black lovers. Yeah.
Yeah. And both male and female. I was very attracted to black people, and I was in a 2-year relationship with an African-American man. And I sometimes hesitate to say I fell in love with him, but I got damn close to falling in love with him. And it was really traumatic when we broke up. But so that's what I knew about myself. And then I got raped, and the man happened to be African American. And I kept trying to fool myself into thinking that it wasn't a rape, Allena. And then when I went to have sex with another African American man, I realized I had been traumatized by the man who raped me, and that it was racially specific, and it was in my body as trauma. And I too felt really shocked and upset that I was having this visceral experience.
I know.
Yeah. And so then I actually went and got counseling for the rape so that I could get past it. And once I healed the rape, I did not have a problem with being.
And the irony for this particular one is that before this happened, I'd had a really horrible experience with a black man who was a pimp back when I was 18, and kidnapped by him and the whole bit, right? Forced out on the street. And the fact that he was African American never affected me having relationships with African American men, but it was the rape that did it. It was different. And this guy effectively raped me, but in a different way. But that one never caused me to have the trauma that the one that, and I mean, I still know the name of the guy who did it to me. I know who he is. Yeah. Well, I'm sure he's someplace here in Seattle. This happened in the 70s, but yeah, it was very weird. So I just gonna let you know, my phone is going to die soon. Not right away, but soon.
All right, thanks for letting me know. We probably, I could talk to you forever. I love you so much, but we probably ought to wrap this up. But I think we've touched upon something that could be a really important thing as far as, because, you know, obviously you and I are, you know, very open to relating sexually to people of different races, and romantically and relationship and friendship wise. It's just been a part of our life. We've both had
That's right. It has been. Yeah.
very racially diverse lives. And yet we could get traumatized, not just by what happened, but somehow or another correlated with the skin color of that human being who perpetrated. And and we both were very upset to find out that that's how we were responding.
I was furious. Yes.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I was shocked, actually, utterly shocked. So I don't have a solution to that, but I can't help but think that it would go in the reverse too, that if people from your family are getting murdered by white cops, I would think that every time you saw a white cop, it would be pretty traumatic.
Of course you would. Of course. Absolutely. You know, it's not, and there is, I mean, we have to be aware of this kind of stuff, and it's, and work on correcting and changing the narrative, so to speak.
Totally.
And it's not easy, but you know, we'll keep at it.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
We will.
I'm really bummed that I wasn't healthy enough to go to all the protests and stuff, because I would have been there in a heartbeat.
Yes.
But, you know, cancer sucks, and I couldn't get out and do it. But
well,
Seattle had some great protests.
I am glad you take care of yourself. Honey, I want everybody that's listening to this to know how to find you. I know you've just published a book, and you've got another one on the way. Okay,
so the book that we just published, I co-authored it. It's a bunch of essays of other people, including you, and it's called Sex Positive Now. And the email or the website is sexpositivenow.com. My personal email is eroticcoaching.com, and you can find me on there. And find my email address is there and everything. And I do coaching. I do sex and relationship coaching, mostly relationship coaching, especially if you're polyamorous or curious about polyamory. And I can do it via Zoom, so we can do it that way. So feel free to contact me. Absolutely. Thanks. And I love you, Veronica. You are the best cousin ever. I'm so glad that we reconnected after all these years. Yeah.
I know our family. You know, you could take or leave them, but I adore you.
I adore you too. Okay. I love you.
Love you too, honey.